Welcome to Dad's Revenge, where quiet men prove that patience is a strength. Each story here is about a father who is underestimated, disrespected, or betrayed by the very people who should be protecting him, and how that father finds his own way to mend things. Welcome to today's story. I spent 42 years keeping trains from hitting each other. That is the whole job. People think it is about the trains. It is not. It is about the box. A little steel box beside the rail out in the weeds, and inside that box is every reason 200 people get home for supper. Nobody ever read the name on my box. Nobody ever needed to. That is how you know the work was done right, when nothing happens and nobody thanks you for it. I told myself that was dignity. My name is Roosevelt Teague. Everybody who ever liked me called me Rosie. I am 69 years old and I live in Ensley on the west side of Birmingham in a house I built with a borrowed level and a bad back. I was a signal maintainer, 42 years. If you have ever crossed a track in Alabama and lived, you are welcome. Here's the first thing they teach you. A green light does not mean the track is clear. It only means the circuit is closed. Somewhere down the line, a relay could be stuck, a wire could be shorted, a man could have gone home early. The light will still burn green, sweet as a lie. So you check it. Then you check it again. 42 years, I never signed a thing I had not read twice. Not a work order, not a repair log, not a receipt for a cup of coffee. Remember that. It matters later. My daughter Yvette got engaged in the spring. She is 33. She is a certified public accountant, which is a thing I say slower than I need to because I like the sound of it. 11 years of school and study and sitting for boards, and she did every bit of it herself. I asked her about the date 4 times over 4 months. Every time, she moved on to something else. Venues were tricky. The photographer was being difficult. Marcus was between funding rounds. I thought she was busy. That is what I thought. I wanted a suit. I have owned 2 suits in my life. One I buried my father in. One I buried my wife in. Both of them came off a rack at a store on 3rd Avenue, and both of them fit me like a feed sack. But there is a man named Tomasino on 19th Street who has been putting Birmingham men in good cloth since before I was born. And I had $1,100 in the coffee can, and I had a daughter getting married. I made an appointment for 11 o'clock on a Saturday morning. Then I sat down at my kitchen table to call her, and I practiced what I was going to say. Out loud, to an empty room. Baby, I need the date. I want to get fitted. Said it once. Did not like how it sounded. Too eager. A man of 69 should not sound eager. Yvette, what is the date I need to see a tailor? Better. I dialed. She picked up on the 4th ring, and behind her I could hear glass. Not dishes, glass. The bright ringing kind that people touch together when they are happy. Hey, Daddy, can this be quick? Baby, I need the date, I said. For the wedding. I want to get fitted for a suit. There was a pause. And in that pause, I heard somebody laugh. Not at anything. Just the loose laugh of a man who is having a good afternoon. Then my daughter laughed too. It was a small laugh, almost kind. Oh, Daddy, she let out a breath. We did it last week. I did not move. The refrigerator hummed behind me. There was a coffee ring on the table that I had been meaning to wipe for 2 days. You did it, I said. Last week. It was a small thing. Marcus's people mostly. And then his voice came up out of the phone, loud and easy, the way a man talks when he has been put on speaker and knows it. Rosie, don't make this a whole thing, all right? It was investors, board people, a couple of folks from the bank. Honestly, we didn't think you would know anybody in the room. We didn't want you sitting there all night with nobody to talk to. He said it like he was doing me a kindness. I did not answer him. I have never in my life answered a man who talks over my daughter to get to me. I said Yvette, just her name. And I gave her the whole room to say something. I gave her every second she needed. She said, he's right, Daddy. You'd have felt out of place. Out of place. At my only child's wedding. I looked at the coffee ring on the table. I thought about how long I had been meaning to wipe it. Congratulations, baby, I said, and I hung up. Now here is where a younger man tears the phone out of the wall. Here is where a man on television starts making calls and moving money. I did not do any of that. I got in my truck and I drove to 19th Street because I had an 11 o'clock appointment and I have never once in my life been late for anything. Tomasino is 80 years old and has hands like paper. He came out with the tape around his neck, and he was already smiling. I said, "Sir, I need to cancel." He looked at me for a second longer than he needed to. He did not ask why. That is a certain kind of manners you do not find much anymore. He wrote out the cancellation slip and slid it across the counter. And I stood there and I read it. The whole thing, both sides. The line about the deposit and the line under that line in the small print about the deposit not being refundable after 72 hours. 42 years. You check it, then you check it again. "You are past the window, Mr. Teague," he said gentle, "but I will give it back." "No, sir," I said. "You keep it. You held the time for me." $200. He held the time for me, and nobody else that day did. I drove home, but I did not go inside. I kept driving out past the last street light down the gravel to where the Vulcan spur comes off the main line. 5 miles of private track running through the weeds behind the old works. There is a switch stand out there. Iron. Older than I am. The throw lever on it weighs about 50 pounds, and I have pulled it maybe 5,000 times in my life. It was full dark. Nothing out there but crickets and the cold coming up off the rail. I put my hand on that lever. I stood there a long time, and I did not pull it. My wife warned me about this. 14 years ago, standing at that stove, I could not sleep that night. So I did what I have always done when I cannot sleep. I went out to the garage. 3 in the morning, cold coming through the door frame. Somewhere off past the tree line, a freight was pulling grade, and you could feel it in the floor before you could hear it. There is a shelf out there up high where I keep the things I do not use. And on that shelf is an oil signal lamp with a red lens. It was my father's. The railroad gave him an electric lantern in 1971, and he thanked them politely, and he went right on carrying that lamp for another 17 years. He said a battery can quit on you. He said fire does not quit. Fire just gets low. I took it down. I wiped the dust off the lens with my shirt. I did not light it. My father's name was Ezra Teague, 30 years on the Southern. He walked track in the heat and he walked it in the ice, and he came home with his hands split open, and he never once told my mother he was tired. He died in 1988 in November, and the company had restructured the pension the spring before. And what he had spent 30 years earning came out to $411 a month. I was 21 years old. At the funeral home, there was a man named Dale Ferris. He was my father's foreman. He wore a gray suit and he had a soft handshake, and he came through the line like everybody else. He took my hand. He looked at the casket and he said, "Your daddy was a good boy. Never gave us 1 minute of trouble in 30 years. A good boy." 63 years old and 30 years of walking track and a hole in the ground. A good boy. And I want you to understand something. I want you to hear this part clear. I shook that man's hand. I stood there in my daddy's church, 10 feet from my daddy's body, and the man called him a boy to my face. And I shook his hand, and I said, "Thank you for coming." I have thought about that handshake more than I have thought about anything else in my life. That was the night I made my deal. I did not make it out loud. You do not have to. I decided that no man was ever going to hold my name in his hand again. Not my name, not my money, not my life. If they do not know what you have, they cannot take it from you. If they do not know who you are, they cannot say what you are. So I got quiet, and I stayed quiet. And I built the quietest life a man can build, and I called it dignity, and I was proud of it for 42 years. Now, Odessa. My wife was a third-grade teacher. She taught in the same building for 29 years, and there are grown men in this city who still call her ma'am. She got sick in 2010. She had time to know what was coming, which is a mercy, and it is also not. One night near the end, she was standing at that stove with her back to me, stirring something she was not going to eat, and she said my whole name. She only did that when she meant it. Roosevelt. "Ma'am? You keep everything locked up in that box of yours." I said, "It is safer in the box." She did not turn around. She said, "One day won't nobody know what is in there." And then she said the part I have carried like a stone in my shoe ever since. Not even her. I said, "She will figure it out." And Odessa stopped stirring. She stood there a second, and she said, "How, Roosevelt? You never leave the door open." She died in April of 2011. Her number is still in my phone. I have never taken it out. I do not know what I think is going to happen. Now, here is the part where you expect me to call my bank. You have heard this story before. Old man gets insulted. Old man cuts them off. Old man teaches them a lesson. Freeze the cards. Cancel the lease. Watch them squirm. I did not call anybody. I want to be honest with you because I am not going to come out of this looking good, and there is no use pretending otherwise. I did not call the bank because I was not angry yet. What I was cold. And when I get cold, I do not shout. I go find out what is broken. There is a file drawer in my back room, bottom left. And in that drawer, there is a folder about 3 inches thick, and on the tab it says, Meridian. Because here is a thing my son-in-law never thought about. When you use another man's track, you sign an agreement. And in that agreement, down in Section 11, there is a clause that says the user provides the owner with audited financial statements. Once a year, every year. It is standard. It is boring. It is how a track owner knows the company running trains across his rail is not about to go under and leave him holding the bag. 3 years. 3 envelopes, and I had opened every single one of them, looked at the top sheet, seen that the checks were clearing, and put it in the drawer. 42 years, I never signed a thing I had not read twice. I never read those. You want to know why? Because they came from family. I sat down at that kitchen table at 3:30 in the morning with a cup of coffee I did not drink, and I turned on the lamp, and I read every page of all 3 years. The sun came up while I was doing it. I did not notice. And I am going to tell you plain, I do not know much about high finance. I know signals, but I know what a number looks like when it is standing there trying not to sweat. They were reporting revenue of $11 million a year. They moved my track. I know what came across it. I know it to the car. They did about 2.5. And on the last page of every one of those statements, down at the bottom, on the line where the accountant certifies that everything above it is true, there was a signature. A signature I have known since it was crooked and proud, and written in crayon on the back of a repair order. Yvette L. Teague, Certified Public Accountant, license number, seal date. My daughter signed her name to it. And I sat there in that kitchen with the sun coming up on my hands, and I knew the way you know a bad rail before you ever see the crack in it, that she had not read a word of it. Because I raised that girl. I taught her everything I knew, everything except the one thing that mattered. There is exactly one person on this earth who will tell me the truth to my face. She washes clothes for a living. Before I get to her, I want you to see one thing. Tuesday morning, I went out to the mailbox, and there was an envelope in it from Meridian Lane Logistics. There is one every month. Same envelope, same window, same weight. Inside is a check. It is made out to a company called Teague Rail Holdings, and my son-in-law signs it himself in blue ink with a big loose signature, like a man who has somewhere better to be. I have been getting that check every month for 3 years. Hold on to that. I will come back to it. Now, Ruthie Mabry has run the laundromat on Avenue F since before Nixon quit. She is 71. She was my wife's closest friend for 40 years, and she does not like me particularly, which is a thing I have always respected about her. I have a washing machine at my house. It works fine. I have been going to Ruthie Mabry's on Tuesday mornings for 14 years anyway. That is a thing you do not explain to people, so I do not. So I sat in the plastic chair by the window, the one with the crack in it, with the dryers going, and the whole place smelling like hot soap, and I told her. I told her about the phone call. I told her about the tailor. I told her what my son-in-law said about me not knowing anybody in the room. And then I sat there, and I waited. Because I will be honest with you, I wanted somebody to feel sorry for me. Ruthie Mabry did not look up. She kept folding towels. Snap, fold, stack. Snap, fold, stack. Then she said, "Did she know?" I said, "Did she know what?" Roosevelt. She used my whole name. When Ruthie uses my whole name, you brace up. Did that girl ever know who you were? I said, "She knows I am her daddy." That is not what I asked you. I said, "Ruthie, I raised that child by myself from 10 years old. I worked nights, I worked doubles, I put her through Auburn without $1 of loans, and I did it on a signal maintainer's wage. And you want to sit there and ask me?" "I know what you did," she said. "Snap, fold, stack. I watched you do it. I am not asking you what you did. She set the towel down. She looked at me. I am asking you what you never said. The dryer behind me went off. Nobody came for it. Dessa told me something one time, Ruthie said. The day you bought that piece of railroad, she came in here and she sat right where you are sitting. And she said, Ruthie, he is not going to tell her. I did not say anything. And I said, why not? And she said she asked you the same thing. Ruthie leaned back against the folding table. And you told her, let the girl find out on her own. I remembered saying it. God help me, I remembered being proud of it. 42 years, Roosevelt. She said it quiet. That was the worst part. She said it quiet. What did she find out? I did not have an answer. I still do not. And then Ruthie Mabry picked up another towel, and she said the thing that turned this whole story sideways. Long as we tell him the truth in here, she said. That boy came in one time. I said, what boy? Your girl's husband. Snap, fold, before he was her husband. I sat up straight in that plastic chair. When? April, year before last. She did not even have to think about it. He come in wearing a jacket cost more than my dryer. Bought a box of detergent he did not need, walked right past the cheap kind, and picked up the $8 one, so I knew he was not here to wash nothing. What did he want? He wanted to talk about you. She stacked the towel. He was smooth about it. Asked, did I know Mr. Teague? I said everybody on this side of town knows Mr. Teague. He said he heard you was a quiet fella. And Ruthie stopped folding. And then he asked me real polite, real easy, like he was asking about the weather. Was you the kind of man that holds on to his money? The dryers turned. That is all I could hear. What did you tell him? I said. I told him the truth, she shrugged. I said Mr. Teague is the kind of man who reads a receipt twice. I closed my eyes. And he laughed, Ruthie said. He laughed, and he picked up his detergent and he said, that is what I thought. April, year before last. He met my daughter in June. He came and asked about the money first. He asked about the money before he ever asked her name. And sitting right there in that cracked plastic chair, I remembered something. The first Sunday she brought him to dinner, he walked around my house with his hands behind his back like a man in a museum. He asked how long I had owned it. He asked, was the lot deep? He asked, did I ever think about what this land might be worth now that the city was building out this way? I thought he was being polite. I thought he was a young man reaching around for something he could talk to an old man about. I got up. I put my hat on. Ruthie did not try to stop me, and she did not tell me to be careful, and she did not say she was sorry, because Ruthie Mabry has never once in her life said a thing she did not mean. What she said was, Roosevelt. I turned around at the door. You gone tell her now? I went out to my truck, and I sat in it. The engine was not running. It was cold enough that my breath was fogging the windshield, and I could see Ruthie through the glass moving around in there, folding other people's clothes. I sat in that parking lot for 30 minutes, and I did what I did the last time I called that girl. I tried to build the sentence first. Baby, I need to tell you something about your husband. No, that is a man starting a fight. Baby, there is something I should have told you a long time ago. Closer. But then she asks me, what? And then I have to say it out loud. And what am I going to say? That I own 5 miles of railroad? That I have owned it since she was in the 8th grade, and I let her go on thinking her daddy was a man who fixed other people's things for a living. And then she asked me why I never told her. I did not have an answer for Ruthie Mabry. I did not have one for her either. I took out my phone. I scrolled down to her name. There she was. Yvette, and the little picture from her graduation. The one where she is squinting into the sun and laughing at something outside the frame. I pressed the call button. It rang once, and I hung up. Now I want you to notice something, because I noticed it sitting right there in that cold truck with the phone going dark in my hand. Ruthie Mabry had just told me my daughter never knew who I was, and I had 30 minutes, and a phone, and her number. And I did not tell her either. 4 days. That is how long it took me to find the rest of it. I want to tell you something about a signal maintainer's mind, because it explains what I did next better than anything else about me. When a crossing gate fails, you do not start at the gate. The gate is where the trouble shows up. It is almost never where the trouble started. You walk the circuit backward, one relay at a time, until you find the place where the wire went bad. Could be 100 feet away, could be a mile. You do not guess. You trace it. So I traced it. Alabama keeps a public registry for limited liability companies, and it is not hard to use if you have a library card and more patience than sense. I have both. I spent Monday finding every filing Meridian Lane Logistics had ever made. I spent Tuesday reading them. By Wednesday, I had a legal pad with 4 columns on it, and by Thursday, those columns had numbers in them that did not sit right in my stomach. I did not do it at a desk. I do not own a desk. I did it at my kitchen table, same as always, with the papers spread out edge to edge and a coffee cup holding down the corner that kept curling up on me. My reading glasses sat so long on the bridge of my nose that Thursday morning I had a groove there I could feel with my finger. I ate standing up those 4 days. I do not remember what. What I remember is the sound of the highlighter. Yellow, then a different yellow for the numbers that did not match, and by Thursday night, the pages looked like a field somebody had already been over with a torch. Meridian Lane told its investors it moved 41,000 containers a year across my track. I ran the maintenance schedule on that spur for 3 years. I know the switch counts. I know the axle counts because the detector at the north end logs every single car that crosses it. And I still have the login for that detector because nobody ever thought to take it away from me. 41,000. The detector said 9,200. That is not a rounding error. That is not an optimistic projection. That is a company standing in front of a room full of bankers and telling them a story. And the story is about 4 times bigger than the truth. I sat there with my coffee going cold, same as it always does. And I thought about the word they use for that. Fraud is the word they use for that. Now, here is the part that took the floor out from under me. Every financial statement a company like that puts out has to be certified. Somebody has to put their license on the line and say, I looked at these numbers and they are real. I told you 3 years ago I stopped reading those statements past the first page. This time I did not stop. Page after page, quarter after quarter, there was a line at the bottom of every single one. A certification block, a seal, a signature. Yvette L. Teague, CPA. License number, date. My daughter's name on every one of those lies in her own hand. I sat with that a long while, because here is what I understand about her license that most folks would not. A CPA does not just add up numbers. A CPA signature is what makes the numbers true in the eyes of the law. Without that signature, that report is just a stack of papers some man printed up to impress people. With her signature on it, it is a sworn financial statement. And if it is false, the person who signed it is the one standing in the courtroom, not Marcus. Her. She was not standing outside this thing wondering why her husband was stressed about money. She was the seal. She was what made the lie legal. And I do not believe for 1 second that my daughter sat down and decided to help her husband defraud a room full of bankers. I believe she signed what he put in front of her. I believe she did not read it. I taught her to add. I taught her to save. I taught her to never sign a lease without walking every room first. I sat at that kitchen table with her for 2 years while she studied for her boards, quizzing her on debits and credits until midnight. So proud I could not hardly stand it. I still remember the night she passed the last section. She called me from the parking lot of the testing center, screaming so loud I had to hold the phone away from my ear, and she said, "Daddy, I did it! I did it on the first try!" And I stood in my kitchen and cried like a man who had never cried before in his life. That is the same hand that wrote her name on the back of a birthday card every year since she was 6, in the same looping style, never changed. I would know it anywhere. I would know it in the dark. And somewhere between that kitchen table and this one, she stopped reading what she signed. I do not know when that happened. I do not know if it happened all at once or a little bit at a time, the way Russ does. While I was sitting there with that thought, my phone lit up. An old message from months back that I had let sit in my inbox like a bill I did not want to open. It was an email from her. Just a few lines. She had written it late past midnight by the timestamp, and it did not sound like the woman on speakerphone with the ice cubes clinking behind her. Daddy, I know things have felt distant. I don't know how to say this right, but I miss how it used to be before everything got so complicated. Can we just talk sometime? Not about anything, just talk. I never answered it. I do not have an excuse for that. I looked for one sitting there, and there was not one to find. I closed the laptop, and that is when the phone rang for real, buzzing across the kitchen table, and I looked down and saw the name. Marcus. He had never once called me in 3 years. Not for a birthday, not for a holiday, not for anything. I let it ring twice before I picked it up because I have never in my life let a man think I was waiting on it. Rosie. His voice came through warm and easy, like we were old friends catching up. Hope I'm not catching you at a bad time. I did not say it was fine. I did not say anything. Listen, he said, filling the silence the way men like him always do. We should talk. About the spur. The little railroad thing out past your place. He said it soft. He said it like it was nothing. Like a man mentioning the weather to an old fool who would not know the difference. There's some paperwork, he said. Nothing complicated. I think it'll be real good for everybody. I looked down at the legal pad in front of me. 4 columns. 41,000 and 9,200. Sitting side by side like 2 men who had never met. Sure, Marcus, I said. Let's talk about the spur. He gave me a number before he gave me a handshake. The Range Rover came up my street a little past 4 on Sunday, black as a hearse, moving slow, the way expensive cars move when the driver is worried about his rims. My street is Fords and Hondas and one Buick that has not run since Easter. That car looked like it had taken a wrong turn off the interstate and ended up somewhere it needed a tetanus shot. Marcus got out first. He is a big man taller than me, built soft, the way men get who pay somebody else to lift things. He had on a blazer the color of wet sand and no socks, which I have never understood as a fashion choice for a grown man walking on other people's driveways. He came up my walk with his hand already out. Rosie, good to finally do this face to face. I shook it. His grip was the kind that is trying to prove something. Yvette came behind him. She had on sunglasses indoors weather, and she did not take them off until she was through my front door. She walked into the house I raised her in, the same living room, the same chair her mother died reading a magazine in, and she did not look at one single thing. Not the photograph on the mantel, not the couch she used to jump on, nothing. She sat down like a woman waiting on a bus. Marcus did not sit. He stood by my fireplace like he owned the mantel, and he opened a leather folder and he started talking before I offered him coffee. So, the spur. He said it easy, like we were old partners. I did some digging, and it turns out you're sitting on a piece of infrastructure that's honestly underutilized. I want to make you an offer that respects that. $400,000. Cash. Clean transaction closes in 30 days. He slid a contract across my coffee table. I think you'll find it's more than fair for a stretch of track that's mostly just sitting there. I did not touch it right away. I looked at my daughter instead. Yvette? She looked up. Dad, it's a good deal. You should take it. That was all. Not a question about how I was doing. Not one word about the wedding or the tailor or the 4 months she went vague on me. Just take the deal, Dad. I picked up the contract, and I read it. I do not mean I skimmed it. I mean I read every page, front and back, out loud in my head, the way I have read every document that has ever come across my table in 42 years. I did not look up. I did not rush. It took 18 minutes. Marcus checked his watch twice. The second time, he did not even try to hide it. Just turned his wrist over, looked down, looked back up at me like a man waiting on a doctor's office. Yvette picked a thread off her sleeve and rolled it between 2 fingers until it disappeared. Nobody said a word the whole time. I could hear the clock in the hall. I could hear Marcus shifting his weight from one loafer to the other, the leather creaking soft, a man not used to standing still. Page 7 is where I found it. Buried between 2 paragraphs about surveying costs, there was a clause. It said that once the sale closed, Meridian Lane would retain permanent right-of-way across the property in perpetuity, the contract said, meaning forever, regardless of the future operating status of the company. Regardless of the future operating status of the company. That is lawyer for even if we go under. You do not write a clause like that unless you already know you are standing on thin ice and you are trying to make sure that when it cracks, you still get to keep your boots dry on somebody else's land. I set the contract down on the table. Gentle. I did not slam it. No, I said. Marcus blinked. I'm sorry. No, I won't sell it. Rosie, $400,000 is a very generous number for. I read page 7, I said. You already know this thing might fold. You wrote yourself a door before you built the house. Something moved behind his eyes. Just for a second. Then it was gone, and something else came up in its place. Something with less patience in it. 600, he said. Final offer. Still no. He laughed. It was not a real laugh. It was the kind men make right before they stop being polite. You know what you are, Rosie. He said my name like it tasted bad in his mouth now. You're the iron box beside the tracks. 40 years people walk past a thing like that every day and not one of them ever bothers to read what's written on the side of it. That's you. That's exactly what you are. The room went very quiet. I looked at my daughter. You think that too? I asked her, soft, not a challenge, a real question. She would not meet my eyes. You don't have to make this so hard, Dad, she said. That was her answer. That was the whole answer. Marcus gathered his folder. On his way past the mantel, he set his water glass down without a coaster, right on the frame of my wife's photograph, and a ring of condensation slid down the glass and onto Odessa's face. He did not notice. Or he did and did not care, which is worse. He was almost to the door when he stopped, and something crossed his face I had not seen on him yet. Something that looked for just a second almost human. My father worked the railroad too, he said, not really to me. Not really to anybody. 22 years. Never made anything of it. Then he caught himself. He straightened up. The mask came back down like a garage door closing. Anyway, he said, think about the offer. I did not ask him more about his father. I filed it away the way you file away a crack in a rail that is not bad enough to shut the line down yet, but bad enough that you remember exactly where it is. They left. The Range Rover pulled off my street too fast, throwing gravel. I picked up the photograph. I wiped the water ring off Odessa's face with my sleeve slow until the glass was clear again. Then I went out to the garage. The lamp was still on the shelf where I had left it, dust already settling back onto the lens I had wiped clean 4 days before. I took it down. I opened the little brass door and I filled it with oil, and I struck a match, and this time I did not put it back unlit. Today was the anniversary. 14 years. I did not say anything out loud. I did not pray, not exactly. I just sat down on the old stool by the workbench, and I set the lamp on the bench in front of me, and I watched the flame sit inside that red glass small and steady, throwing a little circle of color on the concrete floor. The garage smelled the way it always smells. Oil and sawdust and the cold coming off the concrete. Somewhere out past the tree line, a freight rolled through slow, and I felt it in the floor before I heard it the way I always have. I thought about the last time Odessa stood in this garage. She used to bring me coffee out here on Sunday mornings in the blue mug with the chip on the handle, and she would not say anything, just set it down on the bench and go back inside. I still have that mug. I do not use it. I sat there until the oil ran dry and the flame went down to nothing on its own. I did not refill it. There is a version of this where I say my daughter came to apologize and I turned her away, and that is the cruelest thing I ever did. That is not what happened. It is worse than that, and I am going to tell it to you straight. It was 11 o'clock at night, 4 days after they left my living room. I was up because I am always up. Old men do not sleep the way young men sleep. We doze, and then the house makes a sound, and we are awake again staring at the ceiling. Headlights swept across my front window. I know the sound of every car that has ever come down my street, and I did not know this one, so I got up out of my chair and went to the glass. The Range Rover was parked at the end of the lane, not in my driveway, at the end where the street light does not quite reach. Engine still running. Taillights burning red in the dark. I stood behind the curtain and I watched. I could see her silhouette behind the wheel, just sitting there, not moving. The exhaust curling up white behind the car in the cold. 20 minutes. I know it was 20 minutes because I stood there and counted the ticks of the clock in the hall the way you count something when you cannot think of anything else to do with your hands. I put my hand on the deadbolt. I did not turn it. I stood there with my palm flat against that cold brass, and some part of me was already rehearsing what I would say if she got out of that car and walked up my steps and knocked. Baby, come in out of the cold. I have coffee. I had the whole thing ready. She never got out. After 20 minutes, the brake lights brightened, and the car pulled away slow, the way a car pulls away from a place somebody is not sure they should be leaving. And then it turned the corner, and it was gone. I never knew if she meant to knock. She never knew I was standing 3 feet away with my hand on the lock. I want you to sit with that a minute, because I have had to sit with it for a long time now. My daughter drove halfway across this city at 11 o'clock at night and parked outside my house and did not come in. And her father stood on the other side of a door he built with his own hands and did not open it. You want to know who has the right to be angry in this story? I am not sure either one of us has earned it clean. I thought about a night 30 years back when she was maybe 7 and she had a bad dream and came padding down the hall in her socks and stood outside my bedroom door too scared to knock, and I heard her out there breathing, and I got up and opened it before she ever raised her hand. I did not do that this time. I do not have a good reason why. I have thought about it more nights than I will admit to you, and the best I can come up with is that 30 years ago I did not yet know what she was capable of. And this time I did, and knowing it made my hand heavier than it has ever been. But I will tell you what I did the next morning, because that is the part that matters. I drove to the post office on Ensley Avenue, and I sent Meridian Lane Logistics a certified letter. Return receipt requested. Inside was a formal notice invoking Section 11 of the original right-of-way agreement, the one Marcus had never bothered to have anybody read to him, which allows the track owner to terminate access with 30 days written notice for any reason, or none at all. 30 days. That is what the contract said. That is what I gave them. Not 1 day less than the law required, and not 1 day more than I owed a man who put his water glass on my wife's face. Then I went home and I lived my life same as I have lived it every day for 42 years. I fixed the gutter. I watched the Iron Bowl highlights I had already seen. I waited. On the 30th day, I walked out to the switch stand at first light. The grass was heavy with dew, and it soaked through my boots before I got halfway there. Cold coming up off the rail the way it always does in November. I stood in front of that iron stand a moment, the way you stand in front of anything before you do a thing you cannot take back. I put both hands on the throw lever, and I pulled it down. It went with a sound like a door slamming somewhere underground, a deep clank that traveled up through the handle and into my arms and my shoulders and settled somewhere behind my ribs. The point shifted. The rail closed. I took the lead seal out of my coat pocket. I had ordered it special 3 days before, because I do things right or I do not do them, and I crimped it onto the lock with the old pliers I have had since 1981. Then I took out the logbook I still keep out of habit, and I wrote the date and the time, and beneath it, in the same block letters I have used my whole career, spur closed, owner directive. I signed my name. Now I want to take you somewhere I was not. 10 miles away at the Meridian Lane warehouse, a freight crew was backing a 28-car train up to the head of that spur, same as they had done 3 times a week for 3 years. The engineer radioed the dispatcher. Spur's not opening up, showing locked. Locked? How? Private owner locked it. Says so right here on the gate lock. Marcus was in his office when the call came through, and according to the woman who told this part of the story, to somebody who eventually told it to me, he came out into the yard in his socks, no shoes, screaming at a padlock like it owed him money. He kicked the gate once. It did not move. It is a good gate. I hung it myself in 2004. What do you mean, private owner? Which owner? The dispatcher just held up the gate lock, some laminated sheet zip-tied to the fence, and pointed at a line that had been there the whole 3 years, in plain block print, that nobody standing in that yard had ever once bothered to read. Nobody could tell him who it was, because the answer had been hanging in front of their faces the entire time, and not one of them had looked. So he went back inside and he tore through the file cabinet until he found the original agreement, the one that had sat in a drawer for 3 years collecting nothing but dust and his own signature. He read the first line of the ownership clause, Grand Tour Teague Rail Holdings, LLC. He read it, and by every account I ever heard, he relaxed. He thought it was a fund. Some faceless holding company out of Atlanta or Charlotte, the kind of paper entity rich men hide their names behind. He did not think for 1 second to wonder whose name was hiding behind it. He did not read the second line. He never has. What I heard is that he slammed the folder shut and picked up his phone and called his lawyer, and what he said was, "I don't care what it costs. Find out who owns that spur, and when you do, I am going to bury them." They do not hit you with a fist. Men like Marcus Bain do not hit you with a fist. They hit you with paper, and paper has teeth, if you know how to file it right. 9 days after I threw that lever, a process server found me in my own front yard raking leaves and handed me a stack of documents thick enough to prop a door open. Meridian Lane Logistics was suing me. The complaint said I had engaged in willful interference with critical rail infrastructure, a federal offense, and it asked a judge to force the spur back open and award damages on top of it. I stood there in my own yard with a rake in one hand and a federal complaint in the other, and I read the first page standing up right there in the cold before I ever walked back inside. They had a lawyer's name printed at the bottom I did not recognize. Underneath it, in smaller print, was the name of the firm. Big Birmingham Outfit. The kind that keeps its lights on with corporate retainers, not men like me. I called the one man I trust with paper the way I trust myself with wire. Alonzo Pike and I sat 2 rows apart at Miles College in 1976, and he has been talking me down off ledges ever since. He is a small man who dresses like a large one, and he has a voice that makes bad news sound like a weather report. He came to my kitchen table with a legal pad and a thermos of his own coffee because he does not trust mine, and he read the complaint front to back without changing his expression once. "Roosevelt," he said finally, "this is a small problem. Good, but it has teeth." He tapped the summons date with one finger. "When did this actually reach your hands?" "Tuesday," I said. "It says here it was served 10 days before that." He turned the page around so I could see the certified mail receipt stapled to the back. "You had 10 days eaten up before you ever opened the envelope, Roosevelt. A man like you does not sit on his mail for 10 days. He was right. I have never in my life let mail sit. So I went out to my own box at the end of the drive, and I did what I always do, which is check a thing twice before I trust it once. And behind the stack of church bulletins and grocery flyers tucked flat against the back wall of the box, where I would not see it unless I was looking for it, was a printed confirmation from the Postal Service. A change of address had been filed, under my name, redirecting a portion of my mail, the certified kind, the legal kind, to a P.O. box in Highland Park. I drove down to the branch office myself the next morning and asked the woman behind the counter how a thing like that gets filed. She looked it up tapping at her screen a good while and told me it can be done online now, no signature required in person, just a name and an old address and a new one and a few dollars to confirm it. "Anybody could do that," she said, "long as they know your information." "That's the trouble," I said. Somebody did. I stood there at the end of my own driveway, holding a piece of paper that told me somebody had reached into my life without ever setting foot on my property. You do not have to steal a man's mail anymore. You only have to tell the post office where you would rather it go. I brought it inside. Alonzo looked at it a long time. "This isn't clumsy," he said. "This is somebody who knows exactly how thin the margins are on a legal deadline." He set it down. "I want to pull every filing with your name on it in the last year. Everything. I want to see what else moved while you weren't looking." It took him 4 days. He called me on a Thursday evening, and I could tell by the first word out of his mouth that it was bad. Because Alonzo Pike does not waste air clearing his throat unless he is stalling. "Roosevelt," he said, "I need you sitting down." I was sitting down. "There's a deed of trust filed against your property on Avenue G, recorded 11 weeks ago." I did not have a property on Avenue G. I never had. Then I understood. He was not talking about my house. He was talking about the other one, the one 2 streets over that I built with a borrowed level and a bad back 30 years ago, board by board, on weekends and after shifts. The one I signed over to my daughter when she turned 25, so she would always have a roof that could not be taken from her. The house where Odessa took her last breath, in the east bedroom with the window cracked because she always wanted to hear the birds. "It's collateral," Alonzo said. $900,000. A bridge loan, Roosevelt. Meridian Lane pledged that house against a loan to keep the company breathing. I did not say anything for a while. I could hear the refrigerator humming, same as it always does. "There's a signature on it," Alonzo said, quiet now. "I need you to hear this part." "Say it." "Yvette's, notarized, filed 11 weeks ago. 11 weeks ago was 2 weeks before the wedding. My daughter mortgaged her dead mother's house to save her husband's failing company 2 weeks before she stood up in front of a room full of people I was not allowed into and promised to love him for the rest of her life. You want to know what she was paid to sign it? Alonzo asked. No, I said. Nothing, Roosevelt. He said it anyway because that is who he is. She signed it for free. I sat at my kitchen table with the phone against my ear, and I looked out the window at the yard I have kept for 40 years. And I thought about hammering the frame on that house in the summer of 1994, sweat running into my eyes. Odessa bringing me water in a jar because we did not own a cooler yet. I remember the day we set the ridge beam. It took me and 2 men from my crew a whole Saturday, and by the time we got it level, the sun was going down orange behind the trees, and Odessa stood in what would be the kitchen with Yvette on her hip, not even 2 years old yet. And she said, "This is going to be a good house, Roosevelt." I could feel it in the way she said my name, that she meant it like a blessing. I built that house with these hands. My wife died in that house. In a room, I framed myself. With a window, I hung myself so she could hear the birds one more time. And my daughter signed it away like it was a piece of paper she found on the sidewalk. Alonzo Pike called me at 11 o'clock at night. In 40 years of friendship, he has never once called me after 9. I answered on the first ring. "Roosevelt," he said, "I need you to come to my office. Tonight." I did not ask why. A man does not call you at 11 o'clock over something small. His office is on the 4th floor of a building downtown that used to be a bank, and the elevator still has the brass grill from when it was one. The whole floor was dark, except his window, 1 square of light 9 stories up. And I remember thinking on the drive over that a man does not sit alone in a dark building at 11 o'clock unless he is afraid of what he found. He let me in himself. No secretary this hour. He looked like he had not stood up from his desk in some time, jacket off, sleeves rolled, a coffee ring already dried into a ring on a legal pad. He was waiting for me at his desk with his tie loosened and a stack of federal filings spread out in front of him, like a hand of cards nobody wanted to play. "Sit down," he said. I sat. You know the federal government puts out big transportation contracts every few years. Highway freight corridors, rail spur modernization. This year there's one on the table for the whole southeastern quarter. He slid a printed summary across the desk. $200 million, Roosevelt. I looked at the number a long time. It did not get any smaller. To win a contract that size, Alonzo said, a company needs more than a good pitch. It needs certification. Minority business enterprise status, federal rule. The business has to be at least 51% owned and actively operated by a minority individual. I know what MBE is, Alonzo. I have bid jobs my whole life that some contractor needed a certification like that to win. Then you know it is not something you can fake with a good story. The paperwork gets audited. Ownership stakes get verified. Bank records get pulled. He rubbed his eyes with the heel of his hand. Somebody has to actually be the minority owner, Roosevelt, on paper and in fact. Marcus doesn't qualify, I said. It was not a question. Marcus doesn't qualify. Alonzo agreed. Not alone. He turned a page around so I could read it myself. It was an MBE certification application, filed with the state 8 days after the wedding. Listed as 51% owner and co-operator of Meridian Lane Logistics, Yvette Teague Bain. Her CPA license number was printed right there on the form, under a line that said all financial statements submitted with this application have been independently verified by a licensed public accountant. Verified by herself. I read that line 3 times. I am not ashamed to tell you that. I have read contracts my whole life without needing to read them twice, and I read that one 3 times because some part of me kept hoping the words would rearrange themselves into something else. They did not. Her signature makes it real, Alonzo said. Her name makes it legal. Without her, Marcus is a white man with a failing logistics company and a pile of consumer debt. With her, he's a minority-owned enterprise sitting on 5 miles of rail access eligible for $200 million in federal work. I sat very still. Roosevelt, Alonzo said, and his voice went quiet, the way it does right before he says the thing he has been circling. He didn't marry your daughter. He let that hang there a second. He married a filing. And sitting in that office, under those old bank lights, I thought about a laundromat on Avenue F and the boy with a jacket that cost more than a washing machine, asking a woman who folds towels for a living whether the old man down the street was the kind who holds on to his money. April, year before last. 2 months before he ever learned my daughter's name. I did not say any of that out loud. Alonzo did not need me to. He watched my face and he knew. I did not say anything at all for a while. I thought about the day she brought him to my house the first time, how proud she looked walking him up my front steps, how she kept glancing at me sideways to see if I approved. I thought I was watching a girl fall in love. I did not know I was watching a filing get built, one dinner at a time, one Sunday at a time, until it had a ring on it, and a signature that would hold up in federal court. I stood up. I walked to the window. 9 floors down, the rail yard ran along the edge of downtown tracks, catching what light there was, and a freight was coming through slow, the way freights move through a city at night, careful of every crossing. I counted the cars. I do not know why I started. It is just a thing my hands and my eyes do together, an old habit from a life spent making sure every car on a train is accounted for, every axle, every coupling, nothing missing that should be there, and nothing there that should be missing. 1, 2, 3. The red marker light on the last car swung slow around the curve, and I kept my eyes on it, and I kept counting, because counting is a thing I can do with my hands folded and my heart not moving. The cars were tankers mostly. I could tell by the low, round shape of them against the streetlight, the kind that haul liquid chemical up from the Gulf. Behind me, I could hear Alonzo, not saying anything, which is a hard thing for a lawyer to do, and I was grateful to him for it. I got to 28, and I stopped. I do not know why 28. I do not know why my mind picked that number to stop on, but I stood at that window with my back to Alonzo, and I did not turn around for a long moment, and neither one of us said a word, and the city went on being the city underneath us, indifferent to what had just come apart in that room. If you are still with me tonight, and I am glad you are, because this is where it gets hard to hear, say something down in the comments. I would like to know somebody is out there on the other end of this. Alonzo finally spoke. Roosevelt. I turned around. What do you want to do? I thought about every version of what I could do. I could let the certification stand and let the federal government find the fraud on its own in its own time and let my daughter's name be the one attached to it when they did. I could walk away from all of it and let Meridian Lane sink or swim without me ever saying a word to anybody. I could call a reporter. I could call the FBI myself tonight and be done with it before sunrise. None of those were the thing I actually wanted to do. I picked my jacket up off the back of the chair. Where are you going? He asked. I have to talk to my daughter. I had prepared 11 pages. I clipped them together. I numbered every page in the corner, 1 through 11, the way you number pages so a man cannot claim later he never saw the one that mattered. That is how I know how to love a person. I did not learn any other way. It was going on 1 in the morning when I got to the building. Marcus's car was not in the garage, which I already knew because Alonzo had checked before I ever got in my truck. I drove the whole way with the radio off. I do that when I need to hear myself think, and that night, I needed to hear myself think more than I ever had. I ran through what I was going to say 4 or 5 different ways, the same as I did before the phone call about the wedding all those weeks back. And none of the versions sounded right to me either. I parked in visitor parking and sat there a minute with the engine ticking as it cooled. I stood outside her door a good while before I knocked. She opened it in a robe, hair pulled back, and for a second, just a second before her face caught up with the hour, and the visitor, she looked like she did at 9 years old, blinking awake in a doorway, asking what was wrong. Then she remembered we were not that anymore. Dad, it's 1 in the morning. I know what time it is. She did not invite me in. She did not shut the door either. She stood in the gap of it with her arms crossed, and I stood on the other side, and for a moment neither one of us moved. 5 minutes, she said finally, and stepped back. I did not sit. I laid the file out on her kitchen island, page by page, in order the way I would lay out a fault report for a supervisor who needed to understand what had failed and why, without any noise in the telling. Page 1. The right-of-way agreement Marcus signed and never read. "This is what your husband agreed to when he started running trucks across my land," I said. Section 11. He never had a lawyer look at it. Page 2. The financial statements, 3 years, with her certification on the bottom of every one. I set my finger on the signature line and did not say anything at all. I did not have to. "That's my seal," she said quiet. "I know." Page 3. The mortgage on her mother's house. She picked that one up herself before I could lay it flat. "This isn't real," she said. "Recorded 11 weeks ago, Yvette. County Clerk's Office. You can drive down there yourself in the morning and pull it." I went through the rest of it the same way, one page after another, laying out what I had, letting the paper argue for itself. I did not raise my voice. I did not tell her how it made me feel to find any of it. I gave her the facts in order, the way facts deserve to be given, and I let them do the work I did not trust my own voice to do. She read. I want you to understand, she really read it. Not the way she signed things lately, not a glance and a scrawl. She stood at that island in her robe at 1 in the morning, and she read every page, some of them twice, her face going through more changes than I had seen on it in years. Her hand went up to her mouth once around page 6, and stayed there a while. She did not cry. I want to be clear about that, because it would be easy for me to tell it that way and make myself look gentler than I was. She did not cry. She got very still the way I get still, and I realized in that moment how much of me is sitting inside her, whether either one of us ever wanted it there or not. When she got to the MBE application, she stopped a long time on it. She read her own name out loud off the page, like she was checking it was really hers. Yvette Teague Bain, 51%. She looked up. I never signed anything about owning 51% of that company. Your signature's on page 9, I said. Same one that's on all of it. She turned to page 9. She stared at it a long time. Then she looked up at me. Did you do this to Mom too? I did not understand the question at first. Hand her a stack of papers, she said, instead of just talking to her. I did not answer right away. You never told me who you were, Dad. Her voice was not loud. It was worse than loud. It was even. Not once in 33 years, and now you want me to believe you over the man I talk to every single night because you brought me a folder. Yvette. You didn't even tell me you own that railroad, Dad. She set the pages down. I had to hear it from my husband's lawyer in a conference room, like a stranger. I was trying to protect you. From what? From knowing your own father. She laughed short and without any joy in it. You want to talk about signatures I didn't read. What about the 33 years I didn't get to read, Dad? You edited yourself down to nothing, a quiet man in work boots. And I loved that man. I just never got to meet the rest of him until a lawyer showed me the paperwork. I did not have an answer for that. I have turned it over 100 times since looking for one, and I still do not have it. The room went quiet enough that I could hear the refrigerator cycling on somewhere behind her. I opened my mouth. Daughter. I did not say it. I stood there with the word sitting right behind my teeth, and I could not get it to come out, and she watched me try and fail, and something in her face closed like a door being pulled shut from the inside. Go home, Dad, she said, and don't come back. I gathered the 11 pages. My hands were steady. I do not know how. I walked out into the hallway, and I heard the deadbolt turn behind me before I had even reached the elevator. The hallway had that carpet rich people put down that is supposed to look expensive and just looks like it is trying to. I stood on it a long time under a light fixture that probably cost more than my truck, holding 11 pages that had done exactly what I built them to do and nothing more. I had proven my case. I had lost my daughter doing it, and I stood there in that hallway a long time because she was right, and I did not have one word to say back to her that would make it not true. I am going to step out of my own voice for a minute because I was not in the car when this happened. I only know it the way you know a thing that gets told to you later in pieces by people who were there. But I have turned it over enough times that I can tell it to you now like I saw it myself. Yvette was in the passenger seat of Marcus's car 61 days after the wedding, on her way to a meeting she did not fully understand the purpose of. Marcus was driving with one hand and holding a folder against the wheel with the other. I need you to sign something, he said. Background statement for the attorneys. About what? About your dad. She felt her stomach drop the way it had been dropping for weeks now, every time his name came up between them. What kind of statement? It's routine, babe. Context for the court. Nothing dramatic. He handed her the folder without looking away from the road. There's a tab where you sign. She held it in her lap. She did not open it right away. Is this going to hurt him? Marcus reached over and put his hand on her knee the way he always did when he wanted her to stop asking questions. Do you trust me? That is the whole transaction right there. 4 words. He did not answer her question. He asked a different one, a bigger one that made the first question feel small and unworthy of the marriage they had built. She looked down at the folder. She had read 11 pages at her kitchen island less than 2 weeks before. She had stood there in her robe and read every word her father put in front of her, because some old habit in her, something he had built into her a long time ago, would not let her sign a thing without knowing what it said. She thought about that night, now sitting in the car. She thought about her father's face in the hallway light when she closed the door on him. She had been so sure of herself that night. She had felt for the first time in weeks like the daughter of a man who read things twice, who did not sign what he had not checked. The car was warm. Marcus had the heat on high the way he always did. And outside the window, the strip malls went by gray and fast. And some part of her wanted to ask him to pull over so she could actually read what was in her lap. She thought about asking. She did not ask. That habit did not survive the drive to the courthouse. She opened the folder to the tab. She saw her name typed at the top and a paragraph of legal language she did not read past the first line of, and the signature block at the bottom. And she signed it. She has told me since that she thought it was about his temper, about the bat, about things that had actually happened, things she had actually seen. And so she let herself believe the rest of it must be true too. The way a person believes a lie is smaller if part of it is real. What she signed swore under oath that Roosevelt Teague, that is me, was suffering from progressive cognitive decline, that I had been observed wandering onto active railroad property late at night, disoriented, that I had on more than one occasion attempted to operate signal equipment I no longer had any legal authority to touch, that family members had grown increasingly concerned for my safety and the safety of others. Somewhere in the middle of it, a sentence claimed I had once mistaken my son-in-law for a stranger and threatened him with a weapon in a state of confusion. I have never in my life been confused about who Marcus Bain is. She signed her name to all of it. She did not read it. Now, back to me. The letter came by certified mail on a Tuesday, and I signed for it myself, standing on my own porch in my socks. And I opened it right there before I ever got back inside. I read it once. Then, because I have never in 42 years trusted my first read of anything, I read it again. The second time through, I found her signature at the bottom. Notarized, dated, witnessed. She raised her right hand for that. Somebody stood in a room and had her swear an oath, and she lifted her hand and she swore that her father was losing his mind. I stood on that porch a long time in my socks in November, and I did not feel the cold. I read the sentence about the weapon 3 separate times. I know what actually happened in my living room. I know what I said and what I did not say, and none of it lived anywhere near the story typed out on that page. I folded the letter along its original creases. I put it back in the envelope. I carried it inside like it might still be dangerous to the touch. I did not shout. I did not throw anything. I want to be honest with you about what I actually did because it was not dignified, and I have never told anyone the whole of it until right now. I went out to the garage at 3 in the morning, and I opened the hood of my truck and I took apart the entire brake system. Lines, calipers, the master cylinder. Nothing on that truck was broken. I want you to understand that. I took apart a system that worked perfectly, piece by piece, laid every part out on a rag in order, and then I put it all back together again, torque spec by torque spec, the same way I was trained to check a relay case 40 years ago when I could not sleep for worry over something I could not fix with my hands. It took me 4 hours. When the sun came up, I looked down and my thumb was split open along the nail, bleeding into the rag, and I could not tell you when it happened. I do not remember it hurting. I washed my hands. I went inside. I picked the oil lamp up off the shelf. I turned the little brass knob that opens the wick. I did not light it. I set it back down and I stood there looking at it, and I thought about my father's casket and a soft handshake and a good boy who worked 30 years for $411 a month, and I thought that maybe some things are not meant to burn every time you reach for them. At 7 o'clock, there was a knock at my door. Not the way Ruthie knocks, not the way a neighbor knocks. 2 short raps close together, the kind of knock a man learns in training. I opened it. 2 people stood on my porch in dark jackets, badges already out. Mr. Roosevelt Teague. That's me. We're with the FBI. We need to ask you a few questions. They sat at my kitchen table, the same table where I had read 3 years of falsified financial statements, the same table where I first saw my daughter's signature on a lie. 2 of them, a young one with a notepad and an older one who did most of the talking, though she talked less than he did. They asked me if I ever went out to the tracks at night. Yes, I said. 42 years, almost every night. The younger agent wrote that down like he had caught something. I watched him write it, and I did not say anything else because I have learned that the man who talks fastest in a room like that is usually the man with the least to stand on. Mr. Teague, are you aware that your daughter's sworn statement describes repeated, unauthorized nighttime access to active signal equipment? I am aware of what it says. Is it accurate? I asked if I could step into the back room a moment. They let me. I do not think they expected what I came back with. I have kept a signal logbook every single day of my working life, and for reasons I could not have explained to you before that morning, I never stopped after I retired. 42 composition books, spine to spine, filling 3 shelves in the closet off my bedroom. Every date, every shift, every reading, every signature going back to 1982. I carried the first stack out in both arms, the spines worn soft with handling, dust rising off the top ones where they had not been touched in years. I set them down on the kitchen table, heavy enough that the table legs creaked. Then I went back for the rest. It took me 4 trips. By the time I was done, there were 42 logbooks laid end to end across that table, oldest to newest. A little paper wall between me and 2 federal agents who had walked in expecting to find a confused old man. The covers had gone from black to brown to a faded green somewhere in the middle years, whatever the hardware store had in stock that decade. But every one of them was the same size. The same lined pages inside. 42 years of a man's handwriting getting steadier instead of shakier. Which day would you like? I said. Neither one of them answered right away. I opened the top book to a random page and slid it toward them. Every entry in the same block, hand-dated, timed, signed. I have never once left a page blank. I have never once skipped a night because I was tired or sick or grieving. There is something else, I said, you should probably see. I went and got the other folder. Federal regulation requires signal maintainers to undergo a cognitive fitness screening every 6 months for as long as they hold the certification. I have held mine for over 40 years. I never let it lapse, not even after I stopped drawing a paycheck for it, because the habit of checking myself twice did not stop just because the job did. 20 years of screening results, every one of them clean. I do it out of habit, I told them. Same reason I still get up at 5 in the morning. Some things a man does long after the reason for doing them is gone. The younger agent closed his notebook. The older one, she had not said much the whole time, picked up one of the logbooks and turned it over in her hands like she was weighing it. Mr. Teague, she said, I think we have what we need. The whole thing came apart in 40 minutes. 42 years of habit had built a wall nobody could climb over in an afternoon, and I did not have to raise my voice once to make them see. Now I want to take you somewhere I was not. 3 days later, in a glass conference room on the 9th floor of the Meridian Lane offices, the litigation team was preparing for what they still believed would be a straightforward case. A stubborn old man had locked a gate. They needed to establish standing, prove damages, force it back open. Somebody on the team, a junior associate, the kind of person nobody remembers hiring, raised her hand, partway through the meeting, and asked a question so obvious it embarrassed the room into silence. Had anyone actually confirmed who owned the spur? 3 years of lawsuits, threats, and locked gates, and not one person in that company had run a simple title search. They ran it that afternoon. A lawyer for the company slid the document across the table toward Marcus. It was a full ownership history on the Vulcan Spur, going back to the county recorder's office in 2003. Owner of record is Teague Rail Holdings LLC, the lawyer said, reading off the page. Sole member listed as... He stopped. Marcus reached across the table and pulled the paper out of his hand before he could finish the sentence. He read the name himself. Roosevelt E. Teague. 3 years. 36 checks, signed in his own loose blue ink, made out every month to a company he had never once looked up. He had built an entire company on 5 miles of track and never spent 30 seconds finding out whose name was on the deed. "You want to know how much you've paid him, Mr. Bain?" the lawyer said, not unkindly, the way a man delivers news he has decided not to soften. $1.3 million. Over 3 years. You signed every one of those checks yourself. Marcus did not say anything for a long moment. He did not throw the paper. He did not stand up and pace the way he does when he is frightened and trying to look like he is angry instead. According to the 2 people who were in that room and told me about it later, he just sat back down slow, like something had gone out of the air holding him upright. Somebody offered him water. He did not take it. He sat there staring at the name on the page like it might change if he looked at it long enough, the way I had stared at my daughter's signature on those falsified statements, hoping the letters would rearrange themselves into something I could live with. They never do. Letters do not rearrange themselves for anybody. "My father worked the railroad for 22 years, he said. Not really to the lawyer. Not really to anybody in the room. He died in a rental apartment in Fairfield. Alone. I swore to myself I would never end up like him." He set the title search down on the table very carefully, like it might still bite him. He sat there. 3 years. He let me sign checks to him every single month. He knew exactly who I was the whole time, and he let me. He stopped himself. Nobody in that room moved. He never bothered to tell me either, did he? Marcus said quieter now, almost to himself. He never bothered to tell anybody. That sentence sat in the room a long time. Nobody answered it. I was not there. I want you to remember that. Everything I have just told you I only know because it was told to me afterward by people who watched a man I have hated for months finally say something true. And it was true. That is the part that has stayed with me the longest. A system does not fail because of one broken part. It fails because that one broken part passes through 6 places where somebody should have checked it and did not. Without the spur, Meridian Lane could not move a single container. Without the federal contract, they had no revenue to point to. Without revenue, the MBE certification came under review. And once federal auditors start pulling threads on a company that size, they do not stop at the first one they find. They found the inflated statements. They found the mortgage on a house that was never disclosed as collateral in any of the filings it should have been disclosed in. And somewhere in the middle of all of it, an investigator noticed a change of address filed on a federal witness's mailbox 11 days before a certified legal notice was due, and started asking who benefits from a man missing his deadline. Alonzo called me every other day with an update, and each one was shorter than the last, the way a fire burns fastest right before it runs out of anything left to eat. Monday, the contract was formally withdrawn. Wednesday, 2 of Marcus's investors filed to have their money returned. By the following Tuesday, the office on the 9th floor was dark, and a moving company was carting out furniture that had never been paid for outright. The whole company came apart in 11 days. Marcus's lawyers moved fast once they saw which way it was going. He took a plea. Part of the deal required him to cooperate, which meant sitting for hours with federal attorneys and explaining in detail exactly how the fraud had worked and who had done what. In his statement, when they asked about his wife's role, he called her the compliance component. Alonzo read me that line over the phone, slow, like he wanted to make sure I understood he was not paraphrasing. 2 words. That is what 33 years of my daughter's life came down to in the mouth of a man she had trusted enough to sign whatever he put in front of her. Not Yvette, not his wife, a component, a part of a machine that had stopped running. I want to tell you the house came next because that is the order it happened in. But I do not know how to tell it without it costing me something all over again. The house on Avenue G, the one I built with a borrowed level and a bad back. The one where Odessa breathed her last breath in a room I framed with my own hands. Went to auction on the courthouse steps in downtown Birmingham on a cold Tuesday morning in March. I did not have to be there. Alonzo told me I did not have to be there. I went anyway. I stood in the back row behind men in suits I did not know, and the few investors who buy foreclosed property the way other people buy groceries. And I watched an auctioneer I had never met read off the address of my wife's house like it was any other lot on any other list. 3 bedrooms, 1.5 baths, single-family residence, built 1994. He read it the way you read a grocery list. He did not know I hung every door in that house myself, that I laid the kitchen tile on my knees over a long weekend in July, with sweat running into my eyes, that the crack in the bathroom ceiling had been there since a bad freeze in 2009, and Odessa used to say it looked like the state of Florida if you squinted right. He did not know any of that. Why would he? They opened the bidding low. It climbed fast. I had the money. I want you to know that. Sitting right there in an account more than enough to buy that house back 3 times over and never miss it. I did not raise my hand. My arm did not even twitch. I want you to know that. Some part of me had already made the decision long before the auctioneer opened the bidding somewhere back in Alonzo's office or in that federal conference room I was never in. And by the time I stood on those courthouse steps, my body already knew what my heart had not caught up to yet. I do not have a clean answer for why. Part of it was Alonzo's voice in my ear from the week before, telling me every dollar I had was about to be needed somewhere else, somewhere that mattered more. Part of it, if I am honest with you, was something meaner than that, a tired, wounded place in me that could not make my arm move to save a house for a daughter who had signed it away without ever once asking me first. The gavel came down at $214,000, a young couple from Homewood. I heard somebody near me say their names please for them the way you are pleased for strangers who just got a good deal on somebody else's grief. They shook hands with the auctioneer. The young man had his phone out already taking a picture of the house from across the street, and I understood he was not being cruel. He did not know whose grief he was standing in the middle of. Nobody there did except me. I stood there in the cold a long moment after the crowd had already started to thin out, and then I walked back to my truck and I drove home. And I did not cry, because I have never once in my life cried where anybody could see me, and that morning was not going to be the first time. I parked in front of my own garage. I did not go inside. I sat in that truck with the engine off and the radio on, some station playing old soul music the way it always does on weekday mornings, and I did not turn it off. I sat there and listened to the whole song, then the one after it, then the one after that. The cold was coming in through the door seal, the same seal I had been meaning to replace for 2 years. And I let it come. I watched my breath fog up in front of the dashboard vents. Somewhere down the street, a dog was barking at nothing the way dogs do. And I found myself grateful for that too, for the ordinary sound of a world that did not know what had just happened or care. I could not have told you a single lyric if you had asked me right then. I just needed the sound of something in the cab with me that was not my own thinking. My phone rang somewhere in the second or third song, a number I did not recognize. I almost let it go. I do not know why I picked it up. Mr. Teague. My name is Claire Nakashima. I'm a deputy United States attorney. I turned the radio down. I think you and I should talk. She was not a bad person. That is what made this part so much harder than anything that came before it. The federal building downtown has a particular kind of quiet on the 9th floor. The kind that comes from carpet chosen specifically to swallow footsteps. I sat in a plastic chair in the hallway for 11 minutes before anybody came to get me. And I spent that whole time looking at a framed print of the American flag that somebody had hung slightly crooked, and I could not stop wanting to straighten it. Claire Nakashima had a metal table and a folder thick enough to need a rubber band around it, and she did not waste any of my time getting to the point. She was younger than I expected, maybe 45, with the kind of tired eyes that come from believing in a job long after the job stopped being kind to you. Yvette Teague Bain is charged with wire fraud, bank fraud, and making false statements before a federal court. She slid a page toward me. Sentencing guidelines put her at 3 to 5 years. I did not touch the page. You are the primary victim in this case, Mr. Teague. She said it plainly, the way you read a gauge. If this goes to trial and you testify that you believe she acted with knowledge and intent, I win. If you say nothing at all, if you simply do not appear, do not advocate for leniency, do not lift a finger either way. She let that sit a second. I still win. You would not even have to do anything. You would only have to do nothing. I looked at that word a long time. Nothing. As if nothing were a small thing to ask a father to do. "You don't have to decide today," she said gentler than before, watching my face for whatever it was giving away. "Yes," I said, "I do." I sat there, holding in every sense that mattered, exactly what I had wanted since the night I stood in my garage with a burned check and a locked box of my own making. 6 months of being lied to, mortgaged against, sued, investigated, and reported to strangers as a man losing his mind. 6 months of quiet, careful work, undoing every piece of it, one signature at a time. And here it was. All I had to do was nothing, and it would be done. I thought about the burned check on my garage floor 6 months back, and the strange lightness I felt watching it turn to ash. I thought this would feel something like that, a closing, a settling of accounts. It did not taste like anything at all. I want to try to explain that to you because I have turned it over more than almost anything else in this whole story. My invisibility, the thing I built for 42 years, the thing I was proud of, the thing I called dignity, had become the exact weapon used against me. My own daughter could swear under oath that I was losing my mind, and people believed her because nobody had ever been given a reason not to. If they had known who I was, if I had ever once let the door stand open the way Odessa asked me to, none of this would have worked. The armor I built to keep them from taking anything from me had become the very thing that let them try to take everything. I left Nakashima's office without giving her an answer either way. That night, I drove out to the old signal shack, the little steel box beside the rail where I spent more hours of my life than I ever spent in my own living room. I did not tell anyone I was going. I did not decide to go so much as find myself already driving there, the way your hands find a familiar road without asking your head for permission. The door still opened the way it always had, a little stiff on the bottom hinge, a sound I could have picked out of 100 other doors blindfolded. I sat down inside it. The relay panel was dark now, decommissioned years back, but out of habit, my hand found the switch anyway, and one small indicator light still blinked faithful the way it has blinked for 42 years, whether anybody was watching or not. The cold came up through the concrete floor and into my boots. Outside, far off, I could hear the highway, a low, steady hush of tires that never fully stops, not even at that hour. I took out my phone. I scrolled down to the letter O, Odessa. 14 years, and I had never once deleted that number. I could not have told you what I thought was going to happen if I called it. I do not think I was thinking anything at all. I pressed call. It rang twice. A woman's voice answered one I did not know, young, a little wary. "Hello? Who is this?" I did not say anything. I sat there in that little steel box in the dark, and I listened to a stranger breathe on the other end of a line that used to belong to my wife, and I did not say one single word. Then I hung up. I sat there afterward, with the phone still warm in my hand, screen gone dark, and I thought about the last real conversation I ever had with her. Not the sickness, not the hospital, just an ordinary Tuesday. Her asking if I had remembered to pick up buttermilk on the way home. I could not, sitting in that shack, remember if I had answered her or not. Some things you do not know are the last of their kind until long after they are already gone. And then I laughed. One sound. Short. Dry. It did not sound like anything I have ever heard come out of my own mouth before or since, and there was nobody there to hear it but the walls and the one blinking light. And after that one sound, the shack went quiet again. And I sat there in that quiet a long, long time. I walked out to the switch stand before I left. It was the same lever I had thrown to close this whole thing off months before, the same iron I had gripped with both hands the morning I decided I was done being patient. I stood beside it a while in the dark, my hand resting near it, but never on it. I did not pull it either direction. At 6 the next morning, I called Alonzo. "Sell everything," I said. "Everything, Roosevelt. Everything." People ask me what I sold. The answer is shorter if I tell you what I kept. I kept the house in Ensley small, paid off, nothing anybody would fight me for. I kept my toolbox. I kept the oil lamp. Everything else went. I sold the Vulcan Spur to Norfolk Southern for a little over $4 million. 5 miles of track my father once walked in the ice, sold to the very kind of company that once told him 30 years of service came out to $411 a month. I did not feel triumphant selling it. I felt like a man closing a door he had kept open too long out of stubbornness rather than need. I drained my pension. I sold the truck, not the old Ford that one nobody would have wanted anyway, but the newer one I had bought myself as a small reward some years back. I liquidated every account that could be liquidated without a penalty large enough to matter. There is a particular kind of quiet that comes over a man signing away 40 years of careful accumulation in a single afternoon. Alonzo sat with me through most of it, and at one point, watching me initial another page without reading it twice, the way I always had, he said, "You don't have to check this one, Roosevelt. I already did." I signed it anyway. Old habits do not know when to stand down. Then I hired the best criminal defense firm in Birmingham, $680,000 retainer and trial to stand between my daughter and a federal prison sentence. I did not do it to win anything back. I want that understood. I did it because whatever she had done to me, whatever she had signed without reading, whatever she had let her husband build on top of my back, she was still the girl who used to fall asleep on my shoulder in the truck, and I was not going to let her serve 3 to 5 years while I sat on money I no longer had any use for. The trial itself was short because Marcus's plea and the mountain of evidence Alonzo had assembled left very little to actually try. I sat on a hard bench for most of 2 days, watching lawyers move paper back and forth, watching my daughter sit very straight and very still at a table that was not built for a woman 7 months into a pregnancy, though nobody in that room knew that fact yet but her. What it came down to in the end was a single afternoon of testimony and one question the prosecutor asked me that I have thought about every day since. "Mr. Teague," she said, "do you believe your daughter knew what she was doing when she signed these documents?" It was a trap built out of 2 doors, and both of them led somewhere I did not want to go. If I said yes, she was a woman who knowingly committed fraud, and the guidelines would carry her away for years. If I said no, I was standing in a federal courtroom telling a judge that I had raised a 33-year-old woman, educated, licensed, capable, who somehow did not have the sense to read what she put her name on. I had to make my own daughter look foolish to keep her free. I looked at the judge. I did not look at Yvette because I was afraid of what I would do if I did. "I believe my daughter signed those documents because she trusted her husband," I said. The same way I trusted a green light for 42 years back before somebody taught me that a green light only means the circuit is closed. It does not mean the track is clear. I never taught her to check twice. I taught her everything else, not that. I paused there. The courtroom was very quiet. "That is my failure, Your Honor, not hers." Nobody in that room knew what those words cost me to say. And I am not talking about the money. She did not go to prison. The judge gave her probation and a restitution order instead. A mercy by any measure, and one I do not believe would have been extended without everything Alonzo and I had spent months building. But her license was gone. Permanently revoked. 11 years of study and work erased with a single administrative letter that took less time to write than her graduation phone call had taken to make me cry in my own kitchen. I have that letter. Alonzo gave me a copy, and I do not know why I kept it except that I have never in my life been able to throw a document away unread, and somehow that held true even for one I never wanted in the first place. It sits in a drawer I do not open often. Here is the part I have never told anyone before tonight. She does not know what it cost me. She does not know about the spur, or the pension, or the $680,000, or the $4 million that came and mostly went again within the same year. Alonzo asked me once, not long after the verdict, sitting across from me at his desk, with that same tired patience he has carried our whole friendship, "Are you going to tell her, Roosevelt?" "No." He looked at me a long moment. "You're doing that thing again." I did not answer him. There was nothing to say that would have made it untrue. I have not cured whatever is wrong in me that keeps a door shut even when opening it would cost me nothing. I want you to know that. I am not going to stand here and tell you I became a different man by the end of this story, because I did not. A few weeks after the trial, I got a call from a hospital billing office, a routine verification call about insurance. The kind you barely register until one detail catches you sideways. Yvette was 7 months pregnant. Nobody had told me. Not her, not anybody. I sat with that for a long while, staring at nothing in particular. A grandchild I had not been told about, growing in a body I had helped raise, in a life I had just spent almost everything I owned trying to save. I thought about the fishing trips I used to imagine back when Odessa and I first talked about grandchildren, years before any of this, back when family still meant something simple. I thought about a name I did not know, yet a face I could not picture, and a daughter who had not thought to mention any of it to the man who had just sold his father's railroad to keep her free. I did not call her. Then one night in March, with rain coming down harder than it had all winter, there was a knock at my door. Soft, almost too soft to hear over the storm outside. The kind of knock made by somebody who is not sure they still have the right to knock at all. Somebody who has practiced the sound in their head the whole drive over. I opened the door before she had a chance to knock a second time. She was on her knees on my porch, 7 months along, soaked through a coat that was not built for weather like that. Her hair plastered flat, mascara gone in dark lines down a face that did not look like the face on any speakerphone I had ever hated. Behind her, the yard was a mess of running water and dead leaves, the porch light throwing a small yellow circle around us both, and for a moment, neither of us moved. Two people who had run out of anything easy to say to each other. Daddy. Get up, I said. I didn't raise you to kneel. I do not know where those words came from. I had not planned them. They came up out of some place in me that still remembered a little girl learning to walk, and I have never once in my life wanted her on the ground in front of me. Not even now, not even after everything. She got up, slow, one hand on the porch rail, the weight of the baby making it harder than it should have been. I stepped aside and let her in. I did not hug her. I want to be honest about that. I did not have it in me yet, and I have never believed in pretending toward a feeling I had not actually arrived at. I put her at the kitchen table and I cooked. Eggs, the last of the bacon toast. She sat there dripping onto a towel I laid down for her, and I did not ask her a single question while the food was on the stove, because some conversations are better started with something warm already in front of a person. We did not talk for almost 2 hours. She ate slow, like a woman who had not eaten a real meal in some time. I noticed her hands were still shaking a little, even wrapped around a warm mug of coffee I had put in front of her without asking if she wanted it. I noticed the way she kept glancing at the door, like some part of her still expected to be told to leave. I did not tell her to leave. She ate. I washed the pan. I dried it and put it away. I wiped the counter down twice out of habit more than need. The clock on the wall ticked the way it always has, and the rain kept coming against the window, and neither one of us reached for a single word to fill any of it. At one point, she reached out and touched the edge of the table, tracing the same groove in the wood she used to trace with her finger as a girl doing homework at that very spot. And I do not think she knew I saw her do it, and I did not say anything about that either. Finally, she said, I signed the paper, the one that would have put you in prison. I know. Why did you save me? I thought about that question a long time before I answered it. I owed her an honest answer, and honest answers are not always the ones that sound good. I didn't save you, I said. I paid a debt. She looked up at that. I do not think it was the answer she expected, and I do not think it was the answer she wanted. But it was the true one, and by then I had run clean out of any other kind to give her. The next morning the rain had stopped, and everything outside had that scrubbed gray quiet look a storm leaves behind. I drove her out to the spur, what was left of it in my name, the small stretch by the switch stand that Norfolk Southern had let me keep out of respect or pity. I never asked which. I walked her to the throw lever. It's heavy, I said. I can pull it. I have pulled it more times than I could ever count you, but I am not going to pull it for you anymore. She looked at it. She looked at me. Then she put both hands on the iron and she pushed. Nothing happened the first time. Her whole body strained against it and the lever did not move an inch. And for a second, I saw something break loose in her face. The same look she used to get as a little girl, failing at something in front of me for the first time, hating that I was there to see it. Again, I said, not gentle, not harsh either, just steady. She braced her feet, She pushed again. The lever groaned, that same deep iron sound I have heard my whole life. The sound of something old giving way. And the points shifted, and the track opened. She stood there afterward with her hands still in the cold metal, breathing hard, and neither one of us said the thing that was sitting in the air between us. I did not tell her that some people spend their whole lives waiting to be hit again for the thing they did wrong, and some people get let back onto the track instead. I did not say any of that. I have thought many times since about the two things I believed for most of my life, standing next to each other now, like two rails running side by side. The first one, if people do not know what you have, they cannot take it from you. I built my whole existence around that, 42 years of it. But there is a second truth I only found on the far side of losing almost everything, and it is this. If people do not know what you have, they also do not know who you are. And somewhere along the way, without ever once meaning to, I taught my own daughter how to look straight through her father and never see him standing there. I did not say any of that to her either. I am not sure I have the words for it even now telling it to you. I only know how to say a thing like that with iron. With a lever and a hand and a track laid open again after being shut for a long, long time. We stood there together a while longer, the cold coming up through our boots, the sky starting to clear off, gray to white above the tree line. Then I walked back to the truck. I reached into the cab behind the seat, and I pulled out something wrapped in an old rag, the same rag I have kept out there for longer than I could tell you. He unwrapped the rag. Inside was the lamp his father's cleaned, the oil filled to the line. He struck a match against the sole of his boot and lit it, the flame steadying behind red glass. He did not explain what it meant. He closed her fingers around the handle and held them there a moment, then let go. Later, he drove her home a different way, past a house on Avenue G with someone else's porch swing and someone else's curtains in the window. He did not slow down. She did not ask him to. The house passed small and lit gold in another family's evening, and neither of them said a word. For most of my life, I believed one simple thing. If a man does not know what you have, he cannot take it from you. I built 42 years on top of that belief, and it cost me more than I understood until it was almost too late to pay it back. Here is what I know now that I did not know then. A green light does not mean the road ahead is empty. It only means somebody, somewhere, trusted the wire enough not to look twice. Dignity was never in staying hidden. It was in staying honest, even after the hiding costs you the very people you built the hiding place to protect. I did not become a different man by the end of this. I only learned late which door I had been keeping shut. What I carry now is not anger. It is something quieter, a grace I did not earn and cannot fully explain, except to say, I believe God does not measure a family by what it never breaks, but by what it is still willing to mend. I thank God for the daughter who came back to me in the rain, and I thank God I was still standing on that porch, able to open the door. So let me ask you what I have been asking myself. If you were me, if the child you raised signed the paper that could have locked you away, would you have opened that door in the rain? Or would you have let it stay closed? If this story found something true in you tonight, tell me in the comments where you stand on that. And if it moved you even a little, go ahead and subscribe. I have more stories like this one, and I would be glad to have you back for the next.